kitu tulikuwa tunasema. Okay. Nimeenda live but kuna hii filter inanitoa macho vibaya.
Ndio. Tunaona hii filter itoki. Nilikuwa nasikia sister yako akisema but hii filter itoki. Alinichekesha usiku karibu nikufe na kicheko.
Si butterflies hiyo nini macho inafanya hivi. Hizi nini eyebrows. Mute. Simaya. Now we're going to discuss fathers of nations, and we are looking at chapter 6 of Fathers of Nations, considering the fact that the setting style is more on individual characters. I'm going to remind you about last year's question. Now, last year, the question read, Professor Kimani's challenges are evidence of the impact of failed leadership on citizens. So I'm just trying to recall. Professor Kimani's challenges are evidence of failed leadership on citizens. So using examples from Fathers of Nations, that means the students had to use Professor Kimani to discuss that particular question and not any other character. So students that went outside Professor Kimani and used examples like Comrade Melusi and others failed. That is 2025. Now in 2024, the compulsory set text tested the Samaritan, and the question was, the success of any new idea aimed at bringing positive change depends a lot on determination. Using Teacher Nicole. So in 2024, we used Teacher Nicole, and in 2025, we used Professor Kimani. So my thinking is there is a pattern, and my advice to students is this. We may either have a question that restricts students to one character, or the question is left open. So we are discussing Fathers of Nations, which will be the last set book to be tested. This is important to Form 3 students, but it can also help Form 4 students who are preparing for paper 2, since we're just going to look at how to read the text itself and get details from specific episodes. So in today's lesson, we're going to look at chapter 6, and chapter 6 begins on page 82 up to page, I believe, 99. Page 99. It goes up to page 99, and I call it the story of Comrade Melusi. It begins with the security screening during the summit in Banjul, and ends with Comrade Melusi accepting to join AGDA. And it appears like he had no choice, because he was poor, he had a myriad of problems, and it appeared like the only way out was to join AGDA. Now the deal here is, we tell students to study these texts by dividing them into episodes. Apart from studying specific episodes, a student can also master the text when they just study specific characters. They follow the story of a certain character. Now, last year, a student that just focused on Professor Kimani and followed the episodes that centered around Professor Kimani must have benefited, since the question restricted all the students to the story of Professor Kimani. Now, that story may be in different episodes. Like in this book, we have maybe four the characters that we're following, the Path Alpha travelers. That is Kimani from Kenya, Melusi from Zimbabwe. We have Engineer Saif Tahir from Libya, and Pastor Chiamaka Chineke from Nigeria, and their guide, Dr. Afolabi, and maybe Tad Longwe. Maybe you can also look at somebody like Nicole. Now, since we've already looked at Kimani, I want us to also follow the story of Melusi in case that is what the item developer decides to settle on. So it can be Melusi, it can be Tahir, it can be Chiamaka, it can be anybody. But then it can also be left open so that students can now focus on any of the characters. This is how I advise students to read the text. I tell them, one, divide the text into episodes, like we said. In this book, the first one would be, we'll begin at the forward, and then the arrival at the summit on page 1, and so on and so forth. Once they have divided the text into episodes, they should now read to get specific details. And the details are simple. What happens? What is the event? Like, for instance, on page 82, when we meet Melusi, he's actually showing up for the security screening. That is where we have the idea of detection and deterrence of crime. Then once they know what's happening, what's the event, they need to know each event that happens. And that will help students preparing both for paper 2 and paper 3. Because in each, you need to know the event that's happening. Then, apart from the event, who are involved? The characters. Now, like in this chapter, we first meet Comrade Melusi, and then we meet the young security officer that wouldn't let him go in with his needle at first, and they have a bit of a push and shove before he allows him to go in. So who is involved? If you're doing the Samaritan, and look at page 95 of the Samaritan, I don't have it here. Between page 93 and 98, that is where Nicole is arrested. So on page 95, at around the bottom of the page, we have Bembe issuing some orders, and then 2 police officers walk in, and then that's when they arrest Nicole. So when we talk about who is involved in that episode, it's not just Bembe and Nicole. We also have the 2 officers. So many students just say Bembe arrested Nicole. Well, he did, but with the help of these 2 officers. In fact, they did all the job. He was just issuing the orders. A student that says that appears to be one that has read the text and has the facts and issues or gives the facts. So these are the details that we're looking for. What is the event? Who are involved? What actions or activities do they do or take part in? And also, what is the outcome or result of those actions or activities? So you look at what the characters do and the outcome. Like when Melusi tries to attack the rule of Zimbabwe, does it make him suffer? What is the outcome of that? Then once you've talked about the character's actions and the outcome, you should also move on to how other characters react. When Professor Kimani storms into newborn Olom's office and greets him, "You fat baboon," how does he react? Those details are needed when a student is trying to develop their essay. Detail that a student should look out for in an episode is the moral or the lesson. What do we learn? What is the moral lesson that we get or we learn from that particular episode? Now, once you have gotten all those details, that is step number 2. I said step 1 was to divide the text into episodes. That is the student's work. Step 2, the student is supposed to read those episodes and get those 5 details that I've been outlining. Then step 3, they're supposed to group related episodes and read them at the same time. Group related episodes and read them at the same time. And that can be either some issue that happens in the text or just tracking a certain character, reading about one character from the beginning to the end. Like this year's candidates should be reading about characters like Bembe, Jaden, Nicole, Mosi, etc. Just tracking the characters, what they do, what they say, and what happens as a result of their words and actions. A student can just write, maybe say Mosi, and then give the actions and then the outcomes of those actions as part of the studying. So look at an example of when Nicole is arrested. You go to page 47 of the Samaritan and say that is where the planning was happening, and that is where the Bembe was convincing Mosi that I have a way that I can make this teacher play ball. Mosi does not agree with him, but most students say it is Mosi that forced Bembe to do it, or asked Bembe to do it, or they agreed, or they came together and did it. But that's not the case. It is Bembe's idea. In fact, Mosi does not agree with it. So page 47 of the Samaritan. Then on page 93 to 98. So a student will be now reading these pages at the same time so that they can follow Nicole's arrest. From the planning to the execution, page 93 to 98. Then go to page 100 where it fails and she's set free. And page 103 when they meet Jaji and Jaden, and Bembe talks about the fact that we didn't call you here to talk about the teacher's arrest and her release. In fact, it was a big miscalculation on our side, right? And then you move maybe to page 125 where Basdale says she got massive support during the arrest, and page 131 where Bembe apologizes. Now, you will be grouping related episodes and reading them at the same time. So the main episode is the arrest, page 93 to 98. But there are these other related episodes that when you read them at the same time, it helps you master the text even better. The same can be said about the story of Comrade Melusi here. So the main episode here is page 82 to 99. But once you have read that, you also have to combine it with other pages that are related to it. So a student can also move to page 103, where Comrade Melusi studies the Zimbabwe's ruler and remembers the numerous things he ordered, including releasing the Gukurahundi on his people and him losing the wife. So there's something on that. If you're just studying the story of Comrade Melusi, once you've done page 82 to 99, you can also move to page 103. We have some more information on that particular page 103. And that's not all. Once we're done with page 103, we can move on again to more pages that have a mention of Comrade Melusi. That's page 155. 155 to 156, where he seeks revenge. He tries to seek revenge, albeit he does it unsuccessfully. But even having said that, we can still go back to page 143, where he was daydreaming about his wife Ziliza. So 143 to 144, we also have some information about Comrade Melusi. And then lastly, we'll go to page 174. 174, there's again mention of Comrade Melusi, and here we are told, so we've already done 155 to 156, so we go to 174. When others were celebrating, he only did it in absentia. He wasn't there. After his arrest that evening, he had not yet resurfaced. Then lastly, 182. For Professor Kimani, Pastor Chiamaka, and Engineer Tahir, as well as Comrade Melusi in absentia, that moment of victory was therapeutic. So, like we've said, that is 82 to 99, 103, 143 to 144, 155 to 156, 174, and 182. So a student studying the story of Comrade Melusi should have these pages and study these pages at the same time. Page 82 to 99, page 103, page 143 to 144, page 155 to 156, page 174, and page 182. Leonora, repeat your question, but in English, because I don't understand Kiswahili very well. Kwa hivyo andika kwa Kizungu, Kimombo. Well, that is how you group episodes and read them at the same time. Now, I'll say mainly for a student to get most details, it's just chapter 6. Melusi is on chapter 6. And if that is the character that will be tested, or that is the character where will be restricted, then students have to really read page 82 to 99, which is chapter 6. For example, the story of the Gukurahundi killing the wife. They have to give some actual details, and I think that is the only one I'm going to talk about, then we call it a night. After the leader, remember, maybe I can give some background information. The leader, we have two leaders here. We have the leader of Melusi's group. That person was Ndebele, and he's the one who gave Melusi the name Comrade. And then we have another person being referred to as the ruler of Zimbabwe, otherwise known as the Boma. Those are different people. So the Boma, or the ruler of Zimbabwe, is Shona, the largest ethnic group in Zimbabwe, or the larger one. And the smaller one is the Ndebele, to which Comrade Melusi belongs. So first, Melusi expected to be made minister. He was not made because of being in the wrong tribe. The man wanted to strengthen his government by keeping his friends close and his perceived enemies far. So the first enemy would be anybody from a different tribe. Then the leader of Melusi's group was not dismissed immediately, but after some time, we are told on page 88 that a cache of firearms materialized at his home, proof enough that he was plotting a coup. Then he was kicked out, and his people were irritated. They were annoyed. So they took to the streets and they started attacking government supporters. Mainly, or most government supporters were from the Shona group, and the government retaliated. So the retribution was releasing what they called the Gukurahundi, which is a Shona word for the first rainstorm that washes the chaff off the land before tilling begins. And they washed off those insurgents like chaff. So Gukurahundi or Fifth Brigade, this was just a group or an army. In fact, it's something that really happened, and it was they were trained by North Korean soldiers, I think, or they were training together with North Korean soldiers, and they came back and released terror on the Ndebele. So the Shona attacked the Ndebele, and the biggest casualty was Ziliza. Ziliza was Comrade Melusi's wife. And for a student, they have to give details. When Melusi gets home from his office in downtown Bulawayo, the capital of the Ndebele, these are some of the details. That he drove for 50 minutes, but by the time he arrived, the slaughter had already run its course. Then he called out to his wife, Ziliza, Ziliza, Ziliza. A student can quote that 3 times. She did not answer, and he says that was a bad omen. So he rushed to the living room. And what does he see? It was in shambles. Then he rushed out to the backyard, and there was nobody. He's out with his heart pounding. He pressed his face the window of the master bedroom and peered, and there was no one inside. So it is Ziliza, 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 living room in shambles, backyard, nobody there, heart pounding, bedroom, peered in, nobody inside. Then he got back inside and tried the kitchen, and there she was. So when he went to the kitchen, found the wife. The wife had already been murdered. Her eyes were bulges of a dead stare. The Gukurahundi had strangled her. And she lay on the kitchen floor. And she was splayed. She was not just laying there, she was splayed on the floor. So the student should also give such details. And while narrating the story, the author says, now Comrade Melusi dissolved in his tears. See, that is a full description of the pain that Melusi felt when he got home. Ziliza, Ziliza, Ziliza. No response. That was a bad omen, because it appears like if he just got home, the wife was already there to receive him. And backyard, nobody there. Back, peering through the window, heart pounding, nobody there. Goes to the kitchen, finds her. The eyes are bulges of a dead stare, strangled by the Gukurahundi and splayed on the floor as if to taunt him. And then he dissolves in his tears. And before he started telling this story, there's his reaction before he starts telling the story. On page 90, we are told Comrade Melusi's eyes were starting to glisten with the beginning of tears. So students should note such details that are there. Well, the story of Melusi is interesting, but he goes through many problems, right from the fact that he wasn't appointed minister, that betrayal from the new ruler, then the ethnic problems associated with tribalism, like him again not being appointed, his wife being killed by the Gukurahundi. Then the poverty is very poor. You can see that he was poor and hungry, and that's why he couldn't even afford, like other Zimbabwe citizens, he couldn't afford to eat out unless a foreigner was footing the bill. Then there are many other problems that were facing that country, including things like the urban poor who were supporting the opposition parties were displaced by the Murambatsevina. And even some projects that were put in place by the government to try and arrest the issues of poor economy or economic problems facing the country went on and made things worse for the country itself. Then rigging of elections, the president could get 99%, and there was lack of unity between the opposition leaders, and that also contributed to the president getting that 99%. Then it led to disillusionment. People were poor. Melusi had to move to a poorer neighborhood. He couldn't afford rent. Business, there was no money. Low purchasing power, so businesses were also not very productive. And you can see most of the problem again associated are pointing towards the initial betrayal of the Shona leader, and it made Melusi suffer. And then you can also go ahead and look at his reaction or his bitterness or he wants to seek vengeance. He wants to seek vengeance, and especially on page 143, we can see it very clearly up to page 144. To her now came a mournful plea, all the more touching for having a face but not a voice. We're talking about Ziliza in the photo Melusi was staring at. The man responsible for her death, she was begging wordlessly, now must himself die. Comrade Melusi promised her he would see to it. To underline his promise, he rose on his feet, stood at attention, executed a wobbly salute, and intoned an oath. Come next day, he swore she would have her revenge. He wanted to attack the bomber or the rule of Zimbabwe. And you can, that is page 144. But if you go back to page 82, where we started, he's having some sort of quarrel with the young security guard who didn't allow him to go in with his needle, because the security guard argued that on page 84, hey, you could hurt other people with that. So there's some foreshadowing. He insists that he wants to go in with the needle because of his diabetes, but when we look at the flashback, he had already promised the late wife that he was going to seek vengeance to attack that person. And indeed he tries to execute it, but he fails on page 155. So in today's lessons, we're just really looking at how we can attack various episodes in the text, and that was the story of Comrade Melusi. Comrade Melusi, those few pages, maybe I'll remind those of you who are still here, page 82 to 99, page 103, 143 to 144, 155 to 156, 174, and 182, the story of Comrade Melusi. So a student has to get specific details, nitty-gritty, so that their work can be rich with textual illustrations to convince the marker that they read the text or they read the book. See you next time.